Hello, Internet! Welcome to another episode of Full Frontal Developer. No doubt you've seen some flashy web page content in your time and wondered to yourself, how are such things made? Well, today with a few lines of code and a couple of simple files, we'll show how together we can create something super awesome ourselves. Today's project is the waveform animation. And just to show you what our finished product is going to look like, we'll open up our browser over here. And I have here a very simple login page with some fun colors, fun text, and the best part is a fun little animation. Whenever somebody clicks on the field, the text jumps up in this fun little waveform and then jumps back down after I exit the field. And so nothing too super interesting, but just something fun to kind of get our hands dirty with some CSS styling. And so we'll go ahead and jump out of here. I'm going to close this down. I have also open our color wheel at Adobe. And I have our fonts.google.com open with a fun little font that I picked out called the Zon Mono. But without further ado, let's jump into our Visual Studio. We have the three obligatory files, the index.html, script.js, and the style.css. So this project is going to be quite style heavy. It's going to have a little bit of HTML, it's going to have a tiny bit of JavaScript, and it's going to be mostly styling. So without further ado, let's go ahead and begin with the HTML. We'll declare our doc type for the HTML5. We'll set ourselves up an HTML tag. And within the HTML tag, we'll go ahead and make our header tag. And the head tag is going to have the meta tags that we're going to need. The first meta tag will declare, actually, under the HTML. Let's not forget to declare our English language. And then the meta tag under the head tag is going to declare the character set. We'll set it equal to UTF-8 so that all of the characters are properly encoded. Then our next meta tag is going to define the viewport, and that ensures that no matter which device it's being viewed on, it is sized and scaled correctly. So we'll make a viewport. Don't forget my quotation marks there. And we're going to set the content equal to the width equal to the device width. And after that, we will set the initial scale equal to 1.0. Just like that. Close out that meta tag. And after that, let's go ahead and set up our style sheet. So we'll have a link tag. We'll make that a style sheet. And our href is going to be style sheet, style.css. Like so. And after that, we can make our title. So the title is going to be simply form wave animation, like that. And that should be everything we need in the header tag. Now we can declare our body tag. And in the body, we will have a div that will classify as a container. And in this container, we'll have our login information. So let's start with an h1 tag with a nice welcome. And under that, we'll have another class that will classify as form control. And in this div container, we're going to put two inputs and a button. So the first input is going to be for the email. We'll make that a type text. And we're going to make it required as well. And we'll give it a label and simply call it email. And that'll be all we need for that div. In the next div, we will make something that's also going to be called form control for styling. And this div is going to have an input as well, except this type is going to be set equal to password, also required. The label for this guy, as you can imagine, is going to say password. And that's all we're going to need for the two div containers. Now we can design our button, and we'll have it as a class equal to btn, and this button is just going to say login. And then underneath, let's make a paragraph tag. We'll call it a class text, and this is just going to invite the user to, if they don't have an account, to click on an anchor tag, and we'll define that href as just being equal to the page itself. We're not so concerned with the functionality of the registration page as much as just the design. Alright, so close out the anchor tag and the paragraph, and that can be the end. Actually, let's go ahead and put all of this into a form. So after the welcome, let's make a form tag. And we're going to put everything from the inputs to the paragraph in the form tag, just like so. Okay, very last, right under the div, but before the end of the body, we will include our script tag, and the source is going to be equal to script.js. Okay, now that looks like everything good for the body there. Let's go ahead and open this up and see what it looks like. And it's nothing too incredible, just a very simple, plain, boring login page with absolutely no functionality. Okay, so, well, we're well on our way. Jump into style.css and begin the styling. Now, as I mentioned, this is going to be extremely style heavy. And before we get started, we can jump over here to our fonts.google.com and copy and paste this import tag that will give us access to this Zan Mono font. And we'll jump back over here to our Visual Studio and we'll paste that import right there. Next, let's apply some universal styling. That will just be box sizing. And we'll set that equal to border box. Next, we can start with the styling of the entire body content. So this is going to be a background color. And I've actually chosen this fun little color over here. If we go to our color wheel, I'm going to have a combination of this fun blue right here. For our background color, we'll just copy and paste that hexadecimal value and insert it there. And then over here we have the color of the font that we're going to use, which is a fun little kind of off yellow, off orange. So I'll copy that hexadecimal value and we'll come down here and define our color. Not that one, but that one. All right, excellent. So we're off to a pretty good start. We'll see how this looks so far. Okay, still not beautiful, but we're getting there. So now after that, we'll go ahead and define our font family. We need to make sure that we are using, let's see, don't forget my semicolon. So for our font family, we need to be sure that we're using the Zan Mono font. And we'll put in a sans serif tag and save that. Actually, I might actually just minimize this just a little bit just so we can see this as we build it. We'll bring this over a touch and we'll bring this up here, minimize that. Okay, so it's looking pretty good so far, but we'll keep going. So after the font family, we need to define some letter spacing, which I think should be about 2 pixels, just to give it some comfortable spacing there. Display is going to be flex, and we'll do a flex direction of column, and align items to center, and justify content to center. Next, we'll define the height, and we'll set it equal to 100 viewports. 100 view heights right there. And after that, we'll do an overflow hidden. We don't want to see any scroll bars. And we'll define the margin as 0. After that, we can define the container elements, and that's going to be just the background color, which is going to be define RGBA. We're going to make the div for the login to be translucent, so we'll just have it to be black, and then define the alpha value to be 0.4. We'll give it some padding. Say 20 pixels and 40 pixels. And then after that, we can do a border radius to give it a nice little curve. We'll say about 5 pixels. That should be good. And saving that, it's starting to take fruition. It looks pretty good so far. But we still have a little bit more styling to do. So now that the container's done, let's go ahead and start to style the h1 tag. Or rather, yeah, we'll start to style the h1 tag. And that's going to be text align to center and margin bottom. We'll give it about 30 pixel margin from the bottom. Okay, that's looking pretty good so far. Let's then define the anchor tag. That's going to be, we're going to take away the text decoration. We don't want it to do anything when we hover over it. And then we're going to do color. And we'll make that color equal to that beautiful off orange FCD362, like so, and save that. It's starting to come together now. After the container, let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and style the button. So that's going to be the button class, the BTN class that we've assigned it. We'll do a cursor pointer so that it shows us that finger when we hover over it. We'll display, and I'm going to do inline block. And we'll give it a width of 100%. And let's see, background color. Let's do background of just black. Okay, that's pretty good so far. Then of course we need to do the color, and we can do the color, that nice soft yellow, that soft orange. So it's going to be FCD362. Okay. All right, not too bad, not too bad. Let's give it some padding. We'll say about 15 pixels. And then after that, make sure that we do the font family. And we're going to inherit the font family from the body, like so. And then give it the font size. Let's declare that to be 20 pixels. Nice and big. And after the font size, we're going to take away the border. We'll make a border of 0, and then give it also a border radius so that it as well has a nice curve, 5 pixels, so that it matches. All right, so that is a pretty good looking button. Now that we've styled that, let's go ahead and define what the button's going to look like with a focus. So we'll do the class BTN under focus. And for this, I just want to take away the outline. So we're going to do outline of 0. And then when the button is active, we'd like it to do a nice little transition. We want it to kind of shrink just a touch when it's clicked on. So button active, we'll apply a transformation, transform, and it's going to be a scale of 0.9. Okay, so we'll save that. So when we click on it, it shrinks just a little bit. All right, nice. So now let's go ahead and start to style the text. And the text, as you remember, was that paragraph that we defined for the bottom. So that's just going to do margin top. We'll do, let's say, 30 pixels. Okay, we're looking pretty good. And then let's do the form control class. And this, of course, is going to be the 2 inputs that we defined. So for form control, let's do position relative. We'll give it a margin, overall margin, let's say 20 pixels, 0 and 40 pixels, and we'll see how that looks. Not too bad. And then under the width, let's do a width of 300 pixels so that it stretches nice and long across the line. Okay, so now let's do form control for the inputs themselves. So form control of input, we're going to do background color, and we'll make the background color transparent. We really don't want to see it. We're going to take away the border, so let's give it a border of 0. Let's do a border bottom. That way it has a nice fun little line, and we'll make it 2 pixels. And we'll define it as being just black, and we'll make it solid. So that looks pretty good just like that. We're going to display block, and then we'll give it a width of 100% so it fills the entire container it's in. Some padding, let's say 15 pixels, and then 0. And then we'll define the font size of, let's say, 18 pixels. That should be pretty good. And then we'll, of course, have to give it a color. The color is just going to make it a, we'll just do it. Let's do it white. Okay, we'll see what that looks like. Okay, not too bad. That's looking pretty good so far. So now we have to define the form control for the inputs when they're focused, and then we'll also define them when they're valid. So let's do form control of input when focus, and that's going to be, let's go ahead and do them both at the same time. So we're going to do that one, and we're also going to do form control input valid. Okay, so attacking both of those at once, let's take away the outline. Let's do a border bottom color. And we'll make it black as well, like so. Okay. And then let's also grab the form control label. And the label is going to be positioned absolute. We'll give it a top positioning of 15 pixels. And we'll position it to the left by 0. And see what that looks like. Okay, good. We're getting it pretty close to our final product there. Now after the form control label, let's go ahead and style the span within the label. And the span we actually don't have in the HTML, but we're going to apply the span using the JavaScript, and that's what's going to give it that nice little form wave animation. So we'll do form control, label, and attack the span. That's going to be a display of inline block. And we'll do a font size of 18 pixels. We'll do a minimum width, and we'll make it 5 pixels. And then we're going to do a transition. And the transition is going to be that form wave animation. And so we're going to define it as being 0.3 seconds. We're going to use a transition type called a cubic Bezier. And that's going to accept some parameters. Those parameters are just going to be, you can actually play around with these numbers. It'll change all of the, it'll change the function there, but it's going to be just a mathematical function that takes on that wave appearance. And without getting too far into it, feel free to mess around with these numbers yourself, but we'll do 0.68. We're going to do negative 0.55. We're going to do 0.265. And then we'll do 1.55, and that is all the arguments that function accepts. And that'll be that for the span. And then lastly, let's do form control input focus plus the label and the span. And we're going to do that for both the focus and the valid. So let's do form control input valid, including the label and the span. And to style both of those, we're going to do a color, and we're going to go ahead and pick that fun off orange color. That's going to be FCD 362. And then we're going to apply the transform, and it's going to translate the Y. That's going to make it jump up, and we're going to do it by negative 30 pixels. Maybe even do, let's do negative 40 pixels. It might not be enough with just 30. Okay, so now that's everything that we need for the styling. You see that there's still no functionality yet because we have not yet applied the JavaScript. So the JavaScript is going to be what applies the span, and the span is going to have the transition, which is going to transform each one of these letters along a translate Y position up by 40 pixels. And then using this cubic Bezier function, it's going to do it one letter at a time. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the script.js and begin to do the functionality. Now, the script is actually going to be the shortest part, but maybe the most complicated part. And so bear with me as we kind of plow through this together. We'll define a constant, and we're going to need to grab our labels because the labels are what are going to be animated. So we'll call them labels, and since there's more than one, we need to attack both the email and the password. We're going to do a document.query select all because we want to grab both of them, and we've named both of them, we've classified both of them as form control label. And now that we have that constant called labels, that's actually going to be an array. It's going to be an array of both of those document elements. So now what we need to do is we need to iterate. So we'll use a for each loop, labels for each label in there. We'll have a functional string here that's going to then grab the label in question. It's going to change the inner.html or the .inner.html equal to the label.text. like so. And then we're going to apply a couple of functions to that. So we're going to do split, because what we need to do is we need to take the label and split it into its own separate array of each individual letters, because each letter is going to be animated separately. And we'll just do an empty split like that. Then we're going to take that and we're going to apply it to a map, because what we need to do is we need to map each one of the letters to an index position and then apply a span to each individual letter. So the way that we'll do that is by passing through the letter and the index position, and then applying a stream or a function, and using the tick mark, not the single quote, but the one that's above the tab key. We're going to use the tick mark to send through a literal element of span style equals transition delay. And we've used the back tick mark because we actually need to then pass in this this actual JavaScript literal right here, which is going to be the $, and then the curly braces, the index position that we've already declared and passed through, times, we'll say 50, because we want to do 50 milliseconds, but then we can't forget to include the milliseconds after that, so that gets passed into the CSS. And we can close our quotation, we can close out our bracket, and then we can do another $, because we also need to pass in which individual letter we're grabbing from that array of letters that we've built from the label. So we'll pass in the letter like so, and then we will go ahead and close out our span tag, and then we'll have that last left tick there. And so after that, we're going to then rejoin them. So we'll apply the join function, and then we'll just pass through an empty text like that, and that will bring them all back together again into their own single element. So if we save that, and if everything was done correctly, we should be able to see that fun little cubic Bezier animation applied to each letter individually. And again, what happened was we grabbed this entire label, we passed it through as we passed the label through splitting each individual character into an array. Then we've mapped the character that we grabbed to its index position. Then we've passed through some literal JavaScript. We passed through the literal definition of the index position with a little bit of math, and then that literal letter, and then we've joined them back together again into the original array that we've called label. And so, not too shabby, pretty easy, a little bit complex, but it's definitely something that can be looked into if any of that wasn't quite clear. And I would say that this has been some beautiful project. So hopefully this was fun and entertaining, and you learned a little bit more about styling. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see everyone back again in the next video. Have a wonderful night.